So my answer to will I keep my Fujifilm X-T4 in 2022 is pretty simple. And the answer is hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Baris, Alkis, and in this channel we talk about photography and filmmaking. This is a heavy Fujifilm X-T4 themed channel. This is basically the only camera I use in this channel, creating content for this channel and my Instagram account. And I'm approaching towards my second year with the Fujifilm X-T4. And of course, we're on to a new year, and all these companies, Sony, Canon, Nikon, Fujifilm, they're probably gonna release all these cameras. Well, I know Canon and Sony will, I'm not really sure about Fujifilm. But yeah, so a bunch of new cameras are obviously on their way. And I sort of thought to myself, am I happy with my Fujifilm X-T4? And I don't want to take too much of your time, so I'm gonna give you the answer and I'll get explaining afterwards. My answer is yes, I will keep my Fujifilm X-T4 in 2022. You may now turn off the video. Actually, don't. Let me explain. There are 4 things that is making me keep my Fujifilm X-T4 throughout 2022. Let me take a minute and explain them to you. First one is 4K. 4K is still in 2022, and probably for a few more years will still be enough. Especially 4K at 400 megabits. Fujifilm has a really high bitrate, and when this meets with 4K, it's great quality. So quality wise, this camera still holds up to the standards, and the 4K 400 megabits at 10-bit capability gives me enough room to play around with color grading and stuff. So this camera, in terms of quality, picture quality, will still be my go-to and will still keep me happy throughout this year. 8K that Canon and Sony are coming out, it's just not really getting me right now. I don't think there's a market for 8K just yet. Number 2, some of you may actually not agree with this, but I think the autofocus on this camera is good enough. See, I was a Nikon user, and the autofocus was a #1 issue with that camera to me, so that's why I switched over to Fuji. Now, the Fujifilm X-T4, the autofocus is not great. Like, it's got issues. However, now when I'm filming myself, right now, for instance, it's on autofocus. With talking head videos like these, or when I do YouTube videos and vlogging outside and that kind of stuff, it performs really well. It's enough for me, right? I don't need it to, pick up cat eye. I don't need to, not lose my face forever and after. Like, if it naturally loses focus, like if I'm blocking my face and it, if I'm doing like this and it, see, even like that was good, right? If I'm having, natural autofocus losses like that, I have no issue. Especially when this camera meets with the right lens, the autofocus can be just amazing. It could be phenomenal. I am using the Sigma 18-35 1.8 mainly with this camera, and the autofocus has been amazing. I did have some issues with the autofocus before I bought this lens. With this lens, this camera is just insane with autofocus. So autofocus functions does not really attract me as well. I know Canon and Sony has phenomenal autofocus, like, no comments, but it's not something that really attracts me, to be honest with you. Number 3, I work in weird cold conditions, hot conditions. I'm often in the rain. We live in Canada, so it's pretty cold out, snowy out. So I need the camera to physically be reliable. And to be honest with you, I don't really baby my stuff. Like my camera, you can tell if you physically look at it, it's been used. And that's the way I use my stuff. And mind you, I've never dropped the camera or anything like that. I've never dropped the lens nor the camera. The one thing I would recommend if you are interested in the Fujifilm X-T4 would be, don't get the silver version. See, the silver version, once it gets scratched, it does show the scratches quite a bit. I'd recommend getting the black one. I have the silver one, but it's pretty scratched, especially on the bottom where you put the tripod mount. But other than that, physically, this camera has no issues. I've been in rain many times with this camera. Physically, I'm happy with this camera, and that's one thing that's important for me. I just wish it was a little bigger. You might be saying, why would you want a bigger camera? I just like to hold on to bigger camera gear. It feels a lot like a Sony body, which I'm not really a fan of. I wish it was more on the Canon side, but hey, that's okay. It's a great camera. Okay, so I guess the last one now. Like I said, I've been using the Fujifilm X-T4 for almost 2 years now. 2 great years. I've been really happy with the camera, and I have to say, I'm really used to the camera. I'm used to its menus, I'm used to all the buttons, I've custom made stuff on the buttons, and it just feels like it's a part of me right now, right? So like I don't even have to think of, I don't even have to think when I'm doing stuff on the camera. I know where everything is. And this is a stage that's very valuable when you have a gear. This is the time where you get the best of your camera gear because you know all of its capabilities and you know what it can do. I was just playing around with my friend Sony the other day. I was like, how do you put it onto the video mode? Like, you know, it sucks. Obviously, when you first buy a camera, you learn the basic stuff like switching over to video mode. But all the hidden functions, all the custom buttons and stuff, it just makes my life so much easier. And I feel like the camera works with me now rather than me searching what things are in the camera or, you know, getting myself familiar with the menus and the buttons and stuff like that. Right now, I know exactly what this camera can do. I know how the autofocus functions. I know what is there in the menus. I know what kind of data recorded in which function looks the best in this camera. I know the ISO performance. I just know this camera inside and out. From all the things that I've counted, this is the most valuable to me. Because when you learn a new camera, you're gonna miss some shots. You're gonna have some regrets as to, oh, I wish I did this, I wish I used this function or whatever. I've passed that stage with this camera, so for me to go back to that stage, you know, not to say I'll have a lot of regrets and stuff, but there's a learning curve within every camera. That learning curve sometimes could cost you a shot, or it could cost you how everything looks on a film that you're working on, for instance. So that time investment is super valuable to me. So yes, I will keep my Fujifilm X-T4 in 2022. I'm a big fan of this camera. I do my small budget production with this camera, and I run my YouTube channel with this camera. Anytime I need a cinema camera or a different camera, I go rent it out based on the project budget. But for my personal work and for small budget production, this camera is phenomenal. This camera will be with me for quite a bit. Big fan of the Fujifilm X-T4. If you are thinking of buying the Fujifilm X-T4, I would say 100% without a doubt grab it, but make sure to grab a good lens with it. It's super important. Without a good lens, this camera might drive you nuts with the autofocus performance. Again, I have the Sigma 18-35, phenomenal lens. So that's it for this video. I hope I was able to help some of you who are interested in Fujifilm X-T4, or who is maybe, you know, thinking of selling it and that kind of stuff. When you are switching gear, always think about my last point. You've invested time into this gear. That's more than money. Always think of that before switching on to a new gear. Don't settle for anything that's bad quality. I'm not saying just because you've invested time to something, stick with it regardless of how it performs, but Fujifilm X-T4 performs well, and without switching on to something new, think about the time you've invested in this camera. Anyways, thank you all for watching. I hope to see you guys in the next video, and yeah.